Now, what I call cosmic justice has been called by some people social justice. But I think they're unduly modest because they're trying to correct not only the inequities that they see in society, they're trying to correct the oversights of God or the defects of the cosmos. When some people are born with physical or mental handicaps, they want to counterbalance that. And of course, that's not always caused by society. So that when Rawls says that undeserved inequalities, he includes all sorts of things. And that opens up a very large area for others. You can find this perspective on justice, the Rawlsian perspective, in many places, from the street corner community activists right up to the chambers of the Supreme Court. For example, a few years ago, an admissions director at Stanford University wrote a book in which she pointed out that during all her years as an admissions director, she had never required students to submit achievement tests. Because some of those students, she said, through no fault of their own, attended schools where they could not have acquired the skills necessary to do well on such tests. So she's trying to redress the inequalities, and therefore she would simply not require such tests. The Educational Testing Service is currently engaging in a renorming of test scores to take into account the social backgrounds and handicaps of the students so that the score will then, again, redress pre-existing inequalities rather than applying the same standards to everybody. Whenever I hear notions of fairness in education, I think back to my own education. And I think, thank God, my teachers were unfair to me when I was a kid growing up in Harlem. One of these teachers was a lady named Miss Simon, who belonged to what might be called the General Patton School of Education. I cannot even imagine that Miss Simon gave a moment's thought to my self-esteem. Every word that we misspelled in her class had to be written 50 times. Not in class, but as part of our homework. And there was always plenty of other homework from her and other teachers. And so you misspelled 4 or 5 words and you had quite an evening ahead of you. Very little chance of listening to the Lone Ranger. Now, was this fair in Rawlsian terms? And the answer is no. Like many of the children in Harlem at that time, I came from a home where nobody had gone beyond elementary school. I still remember what a big fuss was made when I was promoted to the 7th grade because I'd gone further than anyone else. In later years when I graduated from Harvard, there was no such fuss. They expected me to. But fairness was never an option. There was nothing that Miss Simon or anybody else could do about the fact that we came from homes where we did not have books and magazines, and we were not as familiar with those words as people from other neighborhoods might have been. So that was never an option. Nothing that schools could have done would have changed that. It would have been an irresponsible self-indulgence for them to have pretended to make things fair. If there's anything worse than unfairness, it is make-believe fairness. They could, like the College Board apparently is trying to do, pretended that we knew more than we did. And that would have made them feel good. It would not have done much for us. Instead, they forced us to meet standards that were a little harder for us to meet than they were for some other kids, but far more necessary for us to meet, because that was the only way out of poverty. Many years later, I happened to run into one of the other kids from Harlem who went to that same school at the same time. And by now, he was a psychiatrist. He owned a home in the Napa Valley and property out there. In fact, now he's retired, living overseas with servants, while yours truly is still trying to make a living. But as we reminisced about things that had happened in the old days and what had happened in between, one of the things he mentioned was that over the years, his various secretaries had commented on the fact that he seldom misspelled a word. I told him that my secretaries had made that very same observation, and that if they knew Miss Simon, there would be no mystery as to why we did not misspell words. Now, it so happens I became a high school dropout. But what I was taught before I dropped out was enough for me to score higher on the verbal SAT than the average Harvard student, which may have had something to do with my being admitted to Harvard in an era before affirmative action was even thought of. What if the teachers of that era had been imbued with the present-day conception of fairness? Where would my schoolmate and I be today? On welfare, in prison, perhaps in a halfway house if we were lucky. And would that not have been an injustice? To take individuals capable of independent, self-supporting, and being self-directed women and men with pride in their own achievements and turn them into dependents, clients, supplicants, mascots,